I grew up as a child in the 90s, and my days after school were filled with Nicktoons. Flash forward 15 years later or so, I am browsing the movie section at the local Walmart when I'm hit with a wall of nostalgia. Sitting on the shelf was a complete series of Hey Arnold. I have a shitty job, however, and they want $20, which in mine just translates to 2 hours of work. I decided to be incredibly cheap, and instead of going home to some YouTube episodes to satisfy my urge to remember when the times were simple. It was a mistake I soon forget. I get home, grab some popcorn, and power up my laptop and begin to search. With the simple click of each episode laid before me, satisfied I began to watch. Episode by episode. It was well into dark and I was about to close up the laptop when I noticed a video suggested on the video list that simply read, Hey Arnold, LE. Sure, the LE must have stood for lost episode or something. I clicked on the video, excited to see an episode I had never seen before. At the time, I didn't see any problems after all. All those stories of people terrifying lost episodes of their favorite shows were just stories, right? When the page opened up in the box, it said that the video had been removed, with a half-assed sorry not sorry, frowning red box staring at me. Curious at this point, I scrolled down the comment section for clues, and they weren't that many views, so unsurprisingly, there were only a few comments. Two more or less expressed horror and confusion as to what they had watched, but the third comment caught my eye. It was from the original poster of the video. He explained that the video had been removed, but it still could be watched on the site, and provided a link. I had always had a fear of believing those it would be a virus, but pounding my curiosity getting the better of me, I decided to click on it anyway. It led me to a site to which I can't remember the name. It seemed typical, basic layout with tabs and ads in the middle. However, it was a small box click onto with a play arrow. I clicked and the video went full screen and began to play. I began to ease from my paranoia and sat back as I thought I was going to have a chapter of the cartoon memories added to my collection. I had no idea what followed was nothing short of terrifying and would rock me to my very core. The video started out with a simple text that read, What are you about to watch is what the creators of the hit show Hey Arnold intended to be the original series finale. It angered and frightened Nickelodeon executives, and the episode was never aired as such. If you cannot handle disturbing and potentially vomit-inducing imagery, then you are suggested to leave. You have been warned. I was concerned by this, but pushed off from my mind was the upbeat jazz as rang out tempo, and the theme song began. It was introduced as The Furnace. The show itself started off with Arnold's teacher with the class outside teaching them about chemical reactions and using them to launch a rocket. Harold expresses that he wants to launch the rocket, but the teacher declines, saying that there is no time, and leaves to put up the supplies as the bell rings. It then cuts to Harold, Sid, and Stinky opening the supply cabinet, stealing some rockets and the chemicals, and walking out vowing to make a big blast-off. It's at this point I begin to realize something. This episode looks familiar. I get on my phone and do a little research, and quickly find that this episode that aired was the final season of the show. I am beyond pissed, but decided to watch it anyway, since I figured out my computer is already infested with whatever virus the page had carried anyhow. I clicked on play again, and the boys have stolen the supplies, and have went to an abandoned police station to blow the rocket, in which, coincidentally, Ernie, one of Arnold's attendants, who is at the Demolition Man, is set to destroy with explosives. The boys launch the rocket, and it goes into the building, which blows up due to demolition, and boys stupidly believe it was their rocket that did the damage, thus killing several police officers who didn't know the station was abandoned, and now they were wanted fugitives. This is where things begin to get really strange. The video paused shortly. I moved my arrow to reveal the video was indeed still playing. As soon as it began again, only now the quality had changed. It seemed like a cutover. Stinky knelt on the ground crying, exclaiming that they should go to the police. Harold berates him for this, claiming that they'll be sentenced to the death penalty. "We just killed the police, you idiot!" he screams, clearly angry. I should add at this point that I'm becoming confused and uneasy. I'm a diehard fan of the series and can't recall any of this. The scene continues as Stinky begins to walk off sobbing and claiming that plans to find the nearest police officer to tell him what happened, as it was only a mistake. Harold becomes enraged and often does in the show, but this time he charges at Stinky and tackles him from behind. Stinky then puts up a fight, but is no match for the larger boy, especially since his face first on the sidewalk. "Sid!" Harold yells. "Help!" Sid runs in front of the action, clearly confused and scared, and asks what he wants him to do. "That rock! Grab it!" Sid then looks down and struggles to continue, and sees the large rock lying by the dumpster. He hesitates. "Do it!" Harold commands, "or I'll pound you!" Clearly terrified at this point, Sid picks up the rock, and I can see Sid's eyes grow large, and resistance set in. Harold says, "Okay, Sid, I'll hold him, while you bash his skull with the rock." Sid couldn't move as Stinky lay there with a scraped-up face from the struggle, desperately begging for his life while sobbing uncontrollably. Harold begins to plead with Sid and tells Stinky that if they got away, they would never see their parents again. "You mixed the chemicals. You're just as responsible as I am," Harold screams. "Kill him!" Sid drops to his knees and brings the rock above his head and smashes Stinky's brains in. He closes his eyes, tears flowing around them, and screams, "I'm sorry," over and over, while continuously smashing Stinky's head with the rock. He brings the rock down one last time, and he sits back, chin tucked down in pure guilt, as Harold breathes heavily, able to finally rest on top of the lifeless body below him. They sat there for a moment in silence when Sid simply whispers, "I'm sorry." They hear police sirens in the background, and not knowing it was unrelated to them, Harold begins to panic. Sid's still crying, and begins to ask frantically what they should do. Harold says they need to get out of there. They throw Stinky's body in the dumpster and hightailed out of there. Stinky's blood still freshly pooled in the alleyway sidewalk. They run until Sid sees what appears to be their salvation, Arnold's house. They climbed in through a window that drops to the basement, and they scrambled around and hide whenever they hear the door at the top of the stairs open. Harold hides behind some boxes, and Sid hides beside the stairs. He sits with his knees up to his chest, and his head down between his knees as if broken. Harold comes through the door, exclaiming to his grandpa that he was going to do some laundry, and begins descending to the stairs, not knowing that he is alone. He reaches for the end of the stairs, and hears something behind him. He turns to find Sid sitting there crying with his head between his knees. Arnold appears confused and a little on edge. "Sid?" Arnold asked. "Is that you?" "We killed him, Arnold," Sid says softly in a whimper. "We killed Stinky and left his body in the garbage. No God will forgive us now." Clearly in shock and scared out of his mind, Arnold is unable to call for help. Then he hears it. Footsteps approaching from behind, and then rage-induced breathing, so close that he can almost felt as if the footsteps cease. He turns slowly and stares into the eyes of Harold, who beams down on him with irritation and anger. It charges scene to Arnold being tied to a chair with duct tape around his mouth as you hear the upstairs door opening. You can see the fear in his eyes and muffled screams desperately trying to escape the tape. Grandpa comes down the steps, and probably due to some senility, is often played on the show, believes Arnold is just playing a game. He talks about the game and then laughs as he exits out the door, laughing about the imagination of his youth. As Arnold struggles against his restraints and mutely screams for his life deaf ears. He has no idea it will be the last time he will see his grandson alive. Just playing a game. Out of the back, you can see the boys exit from under the staircase. It cuts to the viewpoint as Arnold in the stairs' dimly lit basement. Sid and Harold enter the shot from each side and stare down at Arnold. Sid looks scared as shakily as Harold what they should do. Harold just looks at Arnold with some angry look on his face and says, "I'm sorry, Arnold, but no one is sending me to jail." The screen goes black. It opens up with the downshot of the basement as Harold closes the door to the furnace. The chair sits empty now with the rope cupped up and lying on the floor. Some blood is on the chair and floor around it. Sid kneels on the ground and absolutely crying. "How could we do this? They were our friends!" Harold appears to feel a little guilt as he explains to Sid that they had to do it, or they would have been locked up. In the little bit of the show of as a mashup of Sid crying, Harold pacing, wondering what to do, and Sid looking at the knife of his grandpa sitting on the workbench, with almost as an acceptance look on his face. It's when you hear a slicing sound and worried, Harold rushes over and looks behind the staircase. There leaned against the wall was Sid with his throat slit in a gruesome death. Harold looks at the scene in shock at first, and then spiteful determination as he claims to his dead friend, "Fine, I'll do it alone then." Harold then hears out the conversation coming from upstairs just beyond the door. Worried it might be someone inquiring about Arnold, he sneaks up the stairs to listen, but no mention of Arnold was made. Instead, he hears Ernie bragging to the rest of the attendants on how he blown up an old abandoned police station that day. It took a minute for Harold's dull mind to register. Then the tears began. His head flooded with guilt as he realized he murdered 2 of his friends that day and lost another, simply due to a misunderstanding. He walked down the steps and sat on the last one. He hung his head in pure shame. The scene opens the door in the shoulder overview of Grandpa as he opens the basement door. He shouts for Arnold that dinner's ready, and then he gets no response. He notices the chair at the bottom of the stairs is empty. He descends the stairs, and when he gets closer, he notices the rope and blood surrounding the chair. He finishes descent fixated on the chair, and then stands on it staring confusion and worry. He double glances around the room looking for Arnold, and when his eyes fixated on something a few feet in front of him, it's Harold, hanging from the ceiling, swaying back and forth ever so slightly. Grandpa moves towards Harold in shock and unable to express any emotion. As he nears him, he puts his hand up to touch Harold, almost as if to ensure that the scene was real. Before it touches Harold, he noticed something behind the boy to the right, a folded up piece of paper taped to the furnace. He approaches the furnace slowly, afraid to find more horrors. He retrieves the note. It simply reads, "Aren't you glad it was just a game?" The camera then cuts to inside the furnace, facing out as pitch black as the doors close. You can see a part of Grandpa going through the 3 rectangular holes to act as a vent. Furnace latches unlocks loudly, and the door creaks and opens slowly. Grandpa's jaw closes and begins to quiver as he sees what lays inside. The only hint given is that the hand of the sleeve the same color of Arnold's shirt pulled up, and both the hand and sleeve were slightly soaked with blood. You look in Grandpa's eyes as he presumably looks upon his only grandson, the remains of his long-deceased son, as he lay mutilated in the furnace. The video cuts to black. I closed the window and slammed my laptop shut as a small part of my diminishing childhood died. Everything was normal after that. I never researched the video or tried to find it again. I just really didn't care as I figured it was lousy, a blit disturbing knockoff made by some overweight nobody in his mother's basement. After a couple of weeks, however, I decided to buy the series, determined not to let my childhood be destroyed by one incident. Sometimes my internet connection was shoddy at best. I began to watch episode after episode until I come up with the last season. It was titled On the Lam, and it was the episode title this knockoff was based on, or vice versa perhaps. I didn't remember much from the episode, but as it played I began to feel disturbed. The similarities between the two were gut-wrenching. I mean, the episodes were the same until the police station was blown up, but after that there were still eerie parallels. Firstly, after the explosion, Stinky was the only one who suggests going to the authorities. Next was Arnold being tied up in the basement, completely furnished with a workbench and furnace, mind you, by the 3 boys. At the moment, though, he can only express irritants and slight anger. And then slightly later, the show happens, that scene. That same damn scene. Grandpa enters the basement and talks about the game that Arnold's playing. It's obvious to anyone who's not crazy that Arnold's not playing the game, and the look of irritance from earlier is gone. The expression on his face is nothing but pure, heart-pounding fucking terror. He shrieks away only a 9-year-old knowing his death is upon him can, but once again, it's smothered by the duct tape as Grandpa closes the door, darkening the basement once again. Except no one dies in this version. It was as if the scene had been left there, cut short and repurposed to the children's version, and it made me wonder if the video could be true, if maybe the show creator, infuriated by the cancellation of this show, intentionally had a much darker ending planned for the blonde-headed boy with the football-shaped head. Later, Arnold comes crashing down the basement door and begins to explain everything to his grandpa. But in the back of my mind, I think that's not Arnold. Arnold is still in the basement, dead in the furnace.